So, you want to be a homicide detective? Check this video out. I've been very fortunate to work in many different areas in law enforcement in my career. Patrol, field training officer, narcotics, street crimes investigations. I even went deep undercover for 13 months. But the most rewarding position for me, robbery homicide. Helping victims of violent crime and having the opportunity to be the voice for a victim that no longer had a voice was the most rewarding experience of my career. Understand that it's not all glamour. The pressures of working a homicide was unlike anything else I've ever experienced. If you've ever lost a loved one at the hands of someone else, and I have, you know that as a family member, your world stops with their death. It's horrifying. And then almost immediately, as a homicide investigator, I became the most important part of their family's lives. I was the one that was supposed to get justice for that family, and that is an extremely stressful position. When I'd catch a homicide investigation, I would wake up 2 to 3 times nightly wondering if I missed anything. I'd wonder if what my next step would be. I'd wonder if I screwed something up, knowing that in the morning the family would want updates. And sometimes I had updates, and sometimes I didn't. Sometimes I couldn't give any updates because we didn't want to compromise the investigation. In one case I worked, the victim's mother cussed me out over the phone, and then she called my captain and told him that I was the worst and laziest detective in the world because I haven't done anything for her or her son. What she didn't know was that I already knew who killed her son, and we were actively hunting him. I couldn't tell her because I knew the family would start posting things on Facebook and the streets would compromise our investigation, and I didn't want the suspect to know he was hot. That was really tough. So if you're up for the challenge, I'm going to give you 3 tips to get you closer to your goal as a homicide detective. I can't tell you how many times I've heard people say, I want to be a homicide detective, but I don't want to be a patrol officer. Unless you go straight to an investigative agency like the FBI, that's not how it works. In every single police department or sheriff's office across the country, you're going to have to start as a patrol officer. That said, patrol is the backbone of learning how to be a good investigator. You need to learn how to conduct a basic investigation before you try to hit the big leagues. As a patrol officer, you'll respond to burglaries, robberies, domestic violence calls, and other calls that require a preliminary investigation. This is where you gain basic skills such as talking to victims and witnesses and suspects, conducting follow-up, and then you'll learn the importance of a well-documented report. More importantly, patrol is where you cut your teeth. This is where you learn the streets. Although anyone's capable of murder, the majority of murders occur in higher crime areas. Not all murders, but most of them. Areas known for drugs, gangs, and violence are where you're going to conduct most of your homicide investigations. And because of this, it's important to learn the streets now as a patrol officer. Know who your players are, your drug dealers, your gang members, your homeless people, your prostitutes, and so forth. Get out of your car, talk to people. Not every interaction has to be an arrest interaction. Talk to your business owners, your convenience store clerks, as well as simply have a conversation with your street people. A big reason why my partner and I were so successful in clearing a large amount of homicides is because we were very proactive in the high crime areas for years. We got to know a lot of the players. Then, years later, those relationships we formed helped us out tremendously because a lot of those same folks ended up being our witnesses, suspects, or even our victims. And let me give you a bonus tip here. Treat people fairly while you're out on the streets. They'll remember that when you need their cooperation later on, should you choose to work homicide. They'll also remember if you were an asshole, so keep that in mind. You can be an aggressive street cop, get illegal guns off the street, make drug and warrant arrests without being a jerk. People remember that practice helped us out exponentially. When you're dealing with a homicide, man, your detective skills are under a microscope. Everybody's watching. Prosecutors, they want rock solid cases. Defense attorneys, they're gonna rip into your work. This isn't shoplifting or simple possession of weed. This is the big leagues. This is homicide. This is where offenders are sentenced to 15 years, 20 years, 30, even life in prison. Your cases gotta be airtight because they're going to be scrutinized. You start honing those skills when you're on patrol. A lot of times patrol officers take initial reports and they forward those reports to the Criminal Investigations Division for follow-up. If your agency allows you to hold on to a case, do it. Learn how to follow up with victims and witnesses. Learn how to write search warrants and subpoenas. Learn how to follow through from inception all the way to identifying your criminal offender. The operational reps you gain are invaluable. And when you find yourself interviewing for that detective spot, you're not just talk. You've got the skills, the warrants, the follow through. You'll earn a reputation as a street cop who gets it done, as a street cop who knows how to do these things. It will absolutely help you during your detective interview. And just for a little bit of information, most agencies are going to require that you work property crimes before they bring you to homicide. That means you'll have to be a detective in burglary or fraud first before you can move to homicide. Now, this isn't always the case, especially with smaller agencies that have a handful of detectives where you're more like a general crimes detective who works all crimes. So, in law enforcement, training is everything. Some departments really drill it in while others not so much. And it's wild how some cops grab those training chances while others don't. They just kind of float by. But no doubt, a well-trained officer, that's a gold mine for any agency. Now, if you're dead serious about homicide, see what I did there? Dead serious, homicide. If you're serious about homicide, you've got to up your game. Hit up those investigative classes. Go beyond what the regular cops are getting. A big component of working homicide is the interview and the interrogation. The ability to talk to people from all walks of life, gangbanger, soccer mom, drug dealer, businessman. The ability to talk to victims and witnesses and obtain thorough statements and better descriptions. The ability to sit across from a murderer and persuade that murderer to open up to you and tell you the truth. Trust me, it's not as easy as you think. Now, I travel all over the country and I teach law enforcement officers about interview and interrogations. And one thing's crystal clear. Those who leave training and start practicing what they've learned, they become great interviewers. But those who don't, they just stay put. You got to take that training and put it to work. Get those real life reps. And part of leveling up is reading. I actually wrote a book on interview and interrogation called Extracting the Truth, where we discuss how to conduct better interviews by showcasing cases that I've worked and how we applied various strategies to become successful in those cases. If you're interested in that book, check it out on Amazon. Training is essential not only to become better at the job, but when it's time to interview for the position of a detective, the fact that you've taken training courses and you read books that your competition hasn't, that will put you in a better position in the selection process. Good luck. Now go out and become a voice for those without a voice.